Wow, I tapped the microphone to turn on the volume and it didn't go. So I was just talking to nothing there for a minute. Okay, let me start over. Happy anniversary. That is typical. That's pretty typical. Is the chat working? I see it working. If you don't, you may need to refresh your page. Oh. Oh, weird. Yes, you're right. Why is that not? Oh, I see what happened. There. That was the result of me mucking around with cameras earlier. Moving things up and down in the priority list moved the chat lower on the list. Hello, YouTube, says Farmos. Wonder, is that gonna... Definitely need to put like just a little something right here as like a... That's not important right now, but just a slightly darker color. So, a whole year of reading books online on Twitch, post them on YouTubes. I see Slightly Stupid Bear in the chat. Hey Bear, how's it going? How are you today? I am warm, so I've got a fan going over there, and hopefully... I think the sound might be coming through a little bit, just watching my sound balance when I'm not talking. Hopefully it's not too distracting. Let me know if I need to adjust that. Dino's looking a little washed out in this light. Oh, and let me try something here. Filters, I don't have any on. Let's try correction. Turn this down a little. Contrast. Oh, that's not quite right. Sorry, I'm mucking with my balance here, trying to... Oh, whoa, look at that. Whoa, rainbow, trippy. Alright, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get those to show up very well, but the balloons... Oh, look at that. You can kind of see them now. The balloons up here have ones on them. I don't know what it wants me to do to... Whoa, look at that. You can barely see my hand when I put it up there. What? It's warm today. It's warm in the house today. I don't know why it's so warm inside. Our air conditioning usually does a slightly better job. Yeah, the blinds have been mucked with just a little. Let's see if that helps. It didn't really change anything, did it? Well, I guess we'll give some time for people to trickle on in. Don't see the Sharkies yet. Hey, there's Bear. How you doing, Bear? How is I don't know what part of the world you're in, but how's the temperature where you are? Oh, there. I don't know. I sat back and now you can kind of see the to close that. The balloons up here, the anniversary decorations. You were yelling at your sir. Thanks, I appreciate that. It's hot soup in Virginia. Virginia. You know, I have a vague sort of preconception of what Virginia is like, but it's very minimal. I don't really know almost anything about what it's like in your part of the world. Hot soup air. I'm not sure if you've been here when I've mentioned, but I'm near like Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And it's been pretty warm here the past few days. It's 7 after 7 p.m. now, and it's still 31 degrees Celsius, which let's see, works out to around like 88 degrees Fahrenheit. But earlier this week, I went to visit my parents a couple cities over, and it was closer to like 38 degrees Celsius, which is like 99 degrees Fahrenheit there. You traveled through here last year. That's pretty cool. What were you doing? Just visiting, seeing the sights, or were you here for a particular reason? Pharma says it's pretty dry here. Sometimes it can get a bit muggy. I've noticed that the past few evenings going outside, it's like the sun's gone, but the air is thick. Ugh. Today it's been dry, yeah, and I think it's pretty dry while the sun is up. Went out to the island, ooh, for a couple of weeks visiting family. Vancouver Island is very nice. Lots of neat things to see and do there. Museums and like parliament buildings are really cool. The like government buildings with the big oxidized copper roofs. I think it's copper, maybe brass or something. Yeah, the gardens. It's what? No, not Minter. It's not Bouchard Gardens? Bouchard? Yeah, Bouchard Gardens are very cool. Was it your first time up in our part of the world, or have you been here before? You said visiting family, so I would guess that means maybe you've been up here before. Yeah, that is a nice thing about living up here, is it is just sort of a beautiful environment. Stanley Park is super cool. That seawall. BC is a rainforest. First time, oh. Family's new to the area as well. What caused them to move up here? Are they new to Canada? Or just to BC? Or just to this part of BC? So a couple of changes for tonight's stream. I don't know whether it's noticeable, but the actual camera I'm using, is shiny and new. It should be a little bit higher quality picture. It should be, I think, a higher frame rate. I think I'm going from 30 frames to 60 with this. I don't know whether that really comes through on Twitch, but yeah. So the picture is hopefully going to be a little nicer. Farmos thinks it looks good so far. I haven't experimented with it too much because one problem with the previous camera was the autofocus gave me troubles if I try and like hold up a map, for example. Well, this one seems to focus up pretty quickly. I got that really easily. The bigger problem though is usually when I take the book away. Hey, look at that! And focus back here. Alright, good sign, good start. Hopefully that can continue with, you know, even with the lighting changing with the sun going down. Because if it works like that every time, then that is going to be one headache removed from me. I wonder where the sharkies might be. Usually they're here by now. The short of it is your ex and son moved there and you went to visit son. Complicated, but went to visit your kid. Okay, okay. I didn't know you had a kid. What's, I don't want to ask. My default was going to say, what's his name? But don't tell me his name on the internet. How old's your kid? Oh, puppy. Oh, look at this guy. I just heard this like sniff behind me and... Oh, puppy. He picked up the bag and he jumped onto my legs. Say hi to the camera. Up here. Look up here. You want to come up for it? No. Another thing with this camera, I'm not sure if it's the case or not, but it feels as though the field of view might be a little bit larger. All gone. All gone, Bin. Bin a bon bean? Bin a kick a bon bean? You think it looks a bit wider? Yeah, I think so. I think the angle, not used to seeing way over to the desk here. I could actually probably move it this way a bit more. Sharkies! Hey, yes, is it noticeable, new camera? Oh, there's the pup. Just before you got here, I was experimenting a little with getting it to focus on the map in the book. 6 years old, jeez. And it seems like it focuses pretty well. Like, that looks really good to me. It didn't take very long. It does a little bit of that, like, focusing in and out. And then when I take the book away, hey, look at that, I'm back in focus. So, that's good. And it does shift a little, I think, more frequently, but I'm fine with that because that means I think that it's trying its best more often. I also have a new trick up my sleeve. You can see Bin a bit clearer than usual. Anybody want to see the new trick I've got up my sleeve? You're gonna have to say yes in the chat for me to pull out the trick. I have not actually tested this with the chat on screen here, so there may be some overlapping, but oh, here we go. Ready? 3, 2, 1, kabam! Look at that. Oh, 2 cameras. Alright, so the chat is overlapping it. What I can do, if we want to change that, is I can put the chat behind it, or I could move the chat even But this way, we've got our bingo sheet here. And also, if we ever want to do it, and hopefully this doesn't immediately get me shut down, but hey, look at this. Oh, we could possibly get it set up over here for reading comics. What do you think about that? Let's find a good page here. Sooner or later, Spider-Man was bound to battle Doctor Doom. Or just a random page here. Now, it's a little tricky for, I'd have to get the hang of framing things. And I can adjust the way that the image appears on screen and things like that. Right now I don't actually have it sort of looking towards me for the image. So it would take some getting used to. But this is a possibility. I've got a fair amount of comics to pick from. This one is just a collection of like the older original Spider-Man comics. I think it actually starts off with Spider-Man #1. Yeah, Amazing Fantasy. Back before it was even Marvel Comics. So yeah, what do you think? Dual camera setup. Pretty cool. Put the chat back on top for now. Also, I've got a fan going over there. Is that making a lot of noise? When I'm not saying anything, I can see my audio meter kind of flickering. So I'm pretty sure some of the sound of the fan is coming through, but hopefully it's not too distracting. Wow, Bear. Oh boy. That's... Alright, okay, I'll allow it. Some background noise. So, yep, fair enough. So yeah, with the bingo card here, look at this. It had to happen. We've been making bingo jokes for so long. It was just, it just had to happen eventually. So let's see, we've got, I'll read out the spaces here, because just in case they're kind of hard to read on smaller screens and things. Actually, while I'm doing that, why don't I just, there. Make it a little easier to read for the moment. So we got Barak suggests violence. Of course, right? Garion gets cocky. That happens occasionally. I thought it deserved a space on the list where he just... It happens every now and then. Head injury. It used to be, like, back in Pawn of Prophecy, I feel like it would have been specifically Garion gets a head injury, but I feel like that's been a little less common, and now I've just opened it up to the entire group. G1 here. Silk is very sarcastic. I figured Silk's default state is sarcastic, so this is like when he goes above and beyond for sarcasm. This isn't just your, like, every conversation he has, but when he really layers it on thick. And then O1 is, of course, when something is grim. Something is described as being grim or grimly or whatever. Then going back to B2 over here, Garion eavesdrops on a conversation. Yes. So this is specifically when Garion is not supposed to necessarily overhear something, and he sticks around strategically out of sight in order to listen in. Then we've got here what Belgarath or Polgara are snobbish about magic. The like, that isn't necessarily how I would have done it sort of thing. Both of them get that pretty frequently. I think honestly this space should be if anybody is snobbish about magic, because we're starting to get a few more sorcerers showing up, and I feel like if anyone really is kind of critiquing somebody else's use of magic, I feel like that'll qualify for that one. N2 is oh hey god. The space is for when a god shows up, because that's been happening a little more regularly. How many gods have we met at this point? I think the first one was probably Issa, then Mara, and then Aldur. And then that's not counting the prologues, where we've had appearances by like Torak and Ul. So not counting those necessarily. But if a god makes an appearance and, has a little chat, it sounds babyish. Yeah, exactly. G2 is Hetar being in Murgo mode. I think we all have a pretty good idea, but Hetar, when a Murgo shows up and his face goes blank and his sword comes out. And then O2 is for Dernick being a pyro. Somebody suggests they start up a campfire and Dernick jumps to get that going. B3 is Belgarath being a dirty old man. This one doesn't happen too frequently. I can only think of like 3 examples so far. Maybe 4. 3 or 4. The primary one was with the Dryads. But then there have also been several references to him spending lengths of time holed up in alehouses, things like that. So I think those qualify for this. I2, we've got, it says nonsense argument. So Garion and Sinedra primarily, but if another nonsense argument were to come up, it would qualify. Our free space is, of course, angst. G3 is Garion getting kidnapped. Again, if anybody else got kidnapped besides Garion, because that hasn't happened for a little while. That hasn't really happened in this book so far. I think the last time was the Palace of Selmisra. So it's not as common as it used to be. So I think if anybody gets kidnapped, that should qualify. But, our previous bingo sheet was for Garion. And then O3 is Sinedra weirdly watches Garion. Hand in hand with Sinedra chewing on her hair. B4, we've got, let's see, unusual descriptive word used. This, I think, primarily came up with the spicy air in the mountains, but there have been a few times. So for this, I think of either a word in a weird context, like spicy air, or a word where I'm like, either I don't know what it means or I just almost never see it. A word that is like just a strange word where I go, I'm not fully familiar with this word, or I don't see it very often. Yeah. Turgid, turbid, turgid, turgid, turbid. Anyways, or the clouds scudding overhead. That's not that weird, but it's a little weird. Scudding? I don't know. I4 is Garion is... Oh, yes. Garion is uncomfortable with world leaders. So this is, Garion is in front of a king or something like that, and awkwardly tries to be formal and polite. That happens more often than you'd expect. N4 is judgy Dernick. Somebody does something that does not match up with Dernick's solid Sendarian values, and Dernick gets all judgy about it. Again, something that comes up basically anytime anyone acts a little unusually. G4, Garion does something unexpected. Pretty open with that one, but you know, does something weird magically, or yeah, uncovers a plot, something like that. I should have just had Garion uncovers a plot as one of the spaces, but whatever. O4 is if anybody is crying. Just anyone. Then we're on to row 5. B5, Garion must stay in an uncomfortable situation. So this is the whole, as opposed to Garion eavesdropping intentionally, this is more like, you know, some people that are in an awkward relationship with each other want to have a conversation, and Garion's like, I'm gonna go, and they go, no, you stay. So yeah, not necessarily also like try not to overlap it with him being uncomfortable around world leaders. I5 is Sinedra issues or orders. Sinedra ordering people around. You know, in general, that could be Garion, but it could be anybody else. Just Sinedra defaulting into her princessly ways. N5 is somebody that does not believe in magic, or does not believe in Belgarath or Polgara. Doesn't, you know, someone just, you can't be Belgarath, I don't believe it. I5, or N5. G5 is Mandarellin being very confident. So much like Silk being very sarcastic, this is, you know, I didn't put overconfident, because frequently when Mandarellin is very confident, he's also got good reason to be, right? He is also very competent, but we just had an example of this, of like, we should all attack Gruul together. No, that's too dangerous. I'll attack him alone. That's safer. And then O5 is Silk being a Dungeons & Dragons rogue. Picking locks, picking pockets, you know, any D&D rogue tropes. Silk doing that stuff. So that's what I came up with for the 25 points on a bingo card. The first 10 or 12 were pretty easy, and then after that I had to start really thinking about it. Not to be conflated with Silk being a D&D bard. Yeah, I don't think that happens too frequently. He hasn't performed too many bardly activities, I don't think. When has he ever made any kind of music? Right. Bringing the chat back on screen. Hey, Robakio's here. Thanks for coming. And thank you. Look at this, I got a dual camera setup now. Just showing that off and showing off our bingo card for the reading. Yeah, I could move the chat like over here. Is that weird? Me like sitting behind the chat? I could also move forward a little bit. Chat on screen. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've had the chat on screen for a little while. The primary reason for this is so that when I upload the videos onto YouTube, I don't necessarily have to read out every single comment as they come up. People can, see the chat on screen. the second camera is today is the first attempt at that. So yeah, now that I've actually finished reading out the bingo card, I'll shrink this back down a little. Poor dino. There we go. Oh, look at that puppy. Hey, pup. There. Hi. He doesn't usually spend too much time in that bed. He's so cute. There was not. That is the first shot right there. Oh, oh no! Now that Robot Kyo said it, Bin's going. Oh, just getting out of your bed. Is it too warm in there? It is pretty warm in the house right now. Even with air conditioning, it's having trouble keeping up. Let's see. Outside, we're now at... it says it's cooled down to 29 degrees outside, which that's 2 degrees over just like half an hour, because I checked it half an hour ago. So it says it's cooled down a little, and then inside we're apparently sitting at 25.5 degrees. Yeah, I considered the only tricky thing with a Binabik cam is that he moves around so much. He doesn't always stay in one spot, and he doesn't always even stay in this room. And right now these cameras are connected directly to my PC, and they don't have the longest cables, so it's tough for me to move them much further than they currently are at. But I mean, oh yeah, like he's now gone. He's moved away. So that's the tricky thing with a bin cam is he doesn't actually always stay where I could place a camera on him. Is there some flickering going on there? Maybe that was just my computer. So I've also got, it's been half an hour already, geez, it's already 7:30. I've also got for tonight a little cake in the fridge right now that I'll have to bust out at some point for celebrating purposes. Yeah, and Robot Kyo wasn't here, but one thought with the second camera is, oh hey look, we could maybe read comics. And I could... Whoa, look at that. Gesundheit. And if we really wanted to, I could even swap the cameras, make myself tiny and down in the corner, and make the camera quite a bit bigger, full screen it or whatever. So if we ever wanted to do some Spider-Man or whatever. Oh man, look at what I just flipped open to. Who is the big man? Okay. This guy, I'm pretty sure it's this guy right here, this little guy right here. I am fairly certain that that is Fancy Dan. I don't remember everybody's names here, but I'm pretty sure this guy right here is Fancy Dan, and his thing is that he knows judo. I think he might know judo, and that's his whole shtick. This guy has a lasso, he's tough, and that's the big man right there. Yep, Fancy Dan. The legendary Fancy Dan. The Enforcers. Ah, boy. Never has anyone fought such merciless foes as the Enforcers. Hey, you wanted to cheer. Thank you. You need a high-tech cam on a gimbal with a tracking tag on. Bin follow him. just I'll just attach a GoPro on a little thing just hanging in front of him. He wouldn't mind at all. Just a little arm. He'll have to wear his harness all the time, and a little arm attached to his harness, and then like a little camera just hanging right in front of his face. Could be a Bin a Bed cam, sometimes guest starring Bin himself. Oh boy. Alright, so I'm guessing that Mr. Robot Kyo is probably not fully up to date with where we're at in Magician's Gambit. I'm guessing Mr. Robot Kyo is probably not on Magician's Gambit. But our heroes have just, in the previous chapter, after some harrowing combat versus an Eldrikin, which is sort of like a giant troll type creature. It's like you're forcing me to... Yeah, there's going to be some spoilers. They're finally descending into the caves of Ulgo. They've been allowed in. That was something I was thinking about. At the very end of the last chapter, we had this little exchange. Belgarath, a deep voice echoed from beneath the slowly tilting stone. Yad ho, Groja Ul. Yad ho, Groja Ul, Vadmar Isham, Belgarath responded formally. Vid mo, Belgarath, Mar Isham Ulgo, the unseen speaker said. What was that? Garion asked in perplexity. He invited us into the caves, the old man said. Shall we go down now? So I was thinking, is this the only other example I can think of off the top of my head of just a completely foreign language would be maybe the Draznian secret language, right? And that's like a sign language. But I don't know if I couldn't think of another example of untranslated words being put down on the page in these books. Am I forgetting something, or is this the first time we've had just a different language other than the secret one? Like, have we ever had like Murgos speaking in their own language or anything like that? I don't know that I don't know that the language they have been speaking has ever even been named. Like, it's never been called, like, common or anything like that. Sharky's thinking the same thing. It's a little interesting. I always am intrigued when something new happens in these books, something just different. So yeah. basically the past, I think, 2 chapters were essentially occupied with the battle against Gruul and the recovery. Hey, Eriker's here! Long time no see! No, the cake has not yet been caked. I was kind of waiting for sort of midway through, so we haven't busted it out yet. Yeah, big crowd tonight. Got Farmouse, Sharkies, Bear, Robakio, Eriker. Eriker, this is the first time you've been back since you made my mug. Does this count as a Chekhov's cake at the moment? No. No, that would be like if you had seen the cake at some point, but nobody necessarily spoke about it, and I never announced my intention to eat the cake. Oh. Oh. So nice. Smoke. Wow. I love this mug. It is my favorite drinking device. Over here. Eriker is the one that made that mug. Everybody tell Eriker how talented she is. Oh, look at that. Wow. I frequently, it'll be like 20 minutes to starting the stream, and I'll be like, where's my mug? I've got to find my mug. I've got to wash my mug. What is that symbol? Oh, it's that you cheered. It gives you a little... that's cool. Just looking at the little symbol in front of Bear's name for having given me the 100-bit cheer. Thank you again. Alright. How long should, at what time should I bust out the cake, everybody? Should that be a reward for getting a few spaces on the bingo sheet? Maybe a chapter? Yeah, I'm gonna read some of this book. We've been doing the whole anniversary catch-up talk for like 45 minutes. How long do I expect to run tonight? I'm guessing probably at least for another hour and a half or so. That's my guess. Probably another hour and a half. We'll see. You know, it is the anniversary thing, so depending on how people are going, I'm willing to keep going. When I want cake, I should have cake. You'll enjoy my dulcet tones while you describe metadata. Oh boy. 12-hour stream it is. Everyone else will have gone to bed. The stream chat will be empty, and I'll just be here by myself reading the book alone. Once everybody else is gone, I'll switch to comics. Erica, look. I got a second camera over here. I could read comics on it. Look at that. It's Spider-Man. I put away the page with Fancy Dan. Oh, actually, here's a page with Fancy Dan. He's in there. This guy right here with the red hat, that's Fancy Dan. I could read some manga or something. That'd be cool. Mr. Sharky is enjoying the superpower of finishing off some appetizers. Ooh. Anything tasty? Alright, I'm gonna start, finally, reading chapter 16. Whoa, look at that. Oh, different camera for book purposes. I am not going to read like this because that would be very uncomfortable for me. But this new camera that I have set up over here does seem to autofocus quite well. Yeah. Look at that. Shifted right back to me. I really like that. Thank you, Farm Mouse. Alright. Everybody ready? Chapter 16. Happy birthday a while ago. Nice. All the deep fried foods. Okay. It took all of Hetar's force of persuasion to start the horses moving down the steeply inclined passageway that led into the dimness of the caves of Ulgo. Their eyes rolled nervously as they took step after braced step down the slanting corridor, and they all flinched noticeably as the grinding stone boomed shut behind them. The colt walked so close to Garion that they frequently bumped against each other, and Garion could feel the little animals trembling with every step. At the end of the corridor, 2 figures stood, each with his face veiled in a kind of filmy cloth. They were short men, shorter even than Silk, but their shoulders seemed bulky beneath their dark robes. Just beyond them, an irregularly shaped chamber opened out, faintly lighted by a dim, reddish glow. You're picturing nervous eye rolls? Well, it's the horses, their eyes rolling nervously, yeah. I think that is what's intended, is the horses are freaking out about being led underground. Belgarath moved toward the 2, and they bowed respectfully to him as he approached. Maybe we're not going to be getting the people not believing in Belgarath in this chapter. Nachos for dinner. It's been a little while since we've had nachos. We make them pretty, I was going to say pretty regularly, but not that often. But I could eat nachos. A lot of cheese. I had leftover pizza earlier today. I don't know if I would eat nachos tonight, but maybe over the weekend. Need to make quesadillas sometime soon too. He spoke with them briefly, and they bowed again, pointing toward another corridor opening on the far side of the chamber. Garion nervously looked around for the source of the faint red light, but it seemed lost in the strange pointed rocks hanging from the ceiling. "We go this way," Belgarath quietly told them, crossing the chamber toward the corridor the two veiled men had indicated to him. "Why are their faces covered?" Dernick whispered. "To protect their eyes from the light when they opened the portal." "But it was almost dark inside that building up there," Dernick objected. "Not to an Ulgo," the old man replied. "Don't any of them speak our language?" "A few, not very many. They don't have much contact with outsiders. We'd better hurry. The Gorim is waiting for us." The corridor they entered ran for a short distance, and then opened abruptly into a cavern so vast that Garion could not even see the other side of it in the faint light that seemed to pervade the caves. "How extensive are these caverns, Belgarath?" Mandaralin asked, somewhat awed by the immensity of the place. "No one knows for sure. The Ulgos have been exploring the caves since they came down here, and they're still finding new ones. It's interesting then that these caves and caverns and passageways are not necessarily all carved by the Ulgos, but were here before them. I was going to say are naturally occurring, but you know, the whole world created by gods thing. Eh. The passageway they had followed from the portal chamber had emerged high up in the wall of the cavern near the vaulted roof, and a broad ledge sloped downward from the opening, running along the sheer wall. Garion glanced once over the edge. The cavern floor was lost in the gloom far below. He shuddered and stayed close to the wall after that. By the way, if I miss a bingo point, what do you call that? Just a single spot. If I miss a bingo space, make sure you let me know, because I'm not going to remember all of these, I'm sure. I don't think "don't any of them speak our language" counts for Judgy Dernick. As they descended, they found that the huge cavern was not silent. From what seemed infinitely far away, there was the cadenced sound of chanting by a chorus of deep male voices, the words blurred and confused by the echoes reverberating from the stone walls, and seeming to die off, endlessly repeated. Then, as the last echoes of the chant faded, the chorus began to sing, their song strangely disharmonic and in a mournful minor key. In a peculiar fashion, the disharmony of the first phrases echoing back joined the succeeding phrases and merged with them, moving inexorably toward a final harmonic resolution so profound that Garion felt his entire being moved by it. The echoes merged as the chorus ended its song, and the caves of Ulgo sang on alone, repeating that final chord over and over. That's an interesting idea. Music that is written to sing with itself, to sing with its own echoes. That's very creative. "I've never heard anything like that," Senedra whispered softly to Aunt Pole. "Few people have," Polgara replied, "though the sound lingers in some of these galleries for days." "What were they singing?" Sharkies have seen something similar. Sacks into a pipe. "What were they singing?" "A hymn to Ul. It's repeated every hour, and the echoes keep it alive. These caves have been singing that same hymn for 5,000 years now." They've been singing that hymn every hour for 5,000 years? It's a bit extreme. I guess you just get used to that when you're falling asleep at night. Although at night is sort of an odd concept underground as well, isn't it? It's the thing though, they don't often get tourists. I don't think they get much business inside these caves. There were other sounds as well. The scrape of metal against metal, snatches of conversation in the guttural language of the Ulgos, and an endless chipping sound, coming, it seemed, from a dozen places. 5,000 years of practice, they ought to be pretty good at singing. Pretty good at that one song, anyway.
There must be a lot of them down there,
Barak observed, peering over the edge.
Not necessarily, Belgarath told him. Sound lingers in these caves, and the echoes keep coming back over and over again.
Where does the light come from? Dernick asked, looking puzzled. I don't see any torches.
The Ulgos grind 2 different kinds of rock to powder, Belgarath replied. When you mix them, they give off a glow.
It's pretty dim light, Dernick observed, looking down toward the floor of the cavern.
Ulgos don't need all that much light.
It took them almost half an hour to reach the cavern floor. The walls around the bottom were pierced at regular intervals, with the openings of corridors and galleries radiating out into the solid rock of the mountain. As they passed, Garion glanced down one of the galleries. It was very long and dimly lighted, with openings along its walls, and a few Ulgos moving from place to place far down toward the other end. In the center of the cavern lay a large, silent lake, and they skirted the edge of it as Belgarath moved confidently, seeming to know precisely where he was going. Somewhere from far out on the dim lake, Garion heard a faint splash, a fish perhaps, or the sound of a dislodged pebble from far above falling into the water. The echo of the singing they had heard when they entered the cavern still lingered, curiously loud in some places, and very faint in others. 2 Ulgos waited for them near the entrance to one of the galleries. They bowed and spoke briefly to Belgarath. Like the men who had met them in the portal chamber, both were short and heavy-shouldered. Their hair was very pale, and their eyes large and almost black.
We'll leave the horses here, Belgarath said. We have to go down some stairs. These men will care for them.
The colt, still trembling, had to be told several times to stay with his mother, but he finally seemed to understand. Then Garion hurried to catch up to the others, who had already entered the mouth of one of the galleries. Well, we did just have large dark eyes, not glowing though, and not pale. But yeah, I definitely thought of that as well. Funny that, me thinking about... There were doors in the walls of the gallery that followed, doors opening into small cubicles, some of them obviously workshops of one kind or another, and others just as obviously arranged for domestic use. The Ulgos inside the cubicles continued at their tasks, paying no attention to the party passing in the gallery. That's kind of odd, isn't it? They get almost no visitors in their caves, and when they do finally get visitors coming through, they don't even pay attention. I would imagine them like staring at me like, whoa, what's going on up there? Who are those people? Why is their hair not pale like ours? Some of the pale-haired people were working with metal, some with stone, a few with wood or cloth. An Ulgo woman was nursing a small baby. Behind them in the cavern they had first entered, the sound of the chanting began again. They passed a cubicle where 7 Ulgos, seated in a circle, were reciting something in unison.
They spend a great deal of time in religious observances,
Belgarath remarked as they passed the cubicle.
Religion's the central fact of Ulgo life. Sounds dull, Barak grunted.
Close. Wrong person. At the end of the gallery, a flight of steep, worn stairs descended sharply, and they went down, their hands on the wall to steady themselves. It would be easy to get turned around down here, Silk observed. I've lost track of which direction we're going. Down, Hetar told him. Thanks, Silk replied dryly. At the bottom of the stairs, they entered another cavern, once again high up in the wall, but this time the cavern was spanned by a slender bridge, arching across to the other side. You think that counts? You think just that thanks counts as Silk being very sarcastic? I don't know. I don't know if that's... Yeah, like, you weren't here when we were discussing it, but Silk's baseline is sarcastic. This spot here is for when Silk is very sarcastic, which does happen, but sometimes he lays it on thick. Yeah, it's a high bar. Sorry. That's a good catch, but also, I mean, Hetar saying down. I feel like Hetar was almost more sarcastic here than Silk was, which is rare. Silk is your, as you can see down here, is a D&D rogue. And part of that is he's got a pretty high sarcasm level. I'll push things this way a little. Is that readable right now? I could probably make it a little bigger without obscuring things too much. That should be fine, right? Should I stretch it all the way down? Is that weird? Am I blocking much by having it like that? Alright. Still good? Okay. This time the cavern was spanned by a slender bridge, arching across to the other side. I never know when to say arching and when to say arcing. Because sometimes CH has that K sound instead, right? I think in this case arching is probably still correct. Oh, okay. Thank you. That's helpful. I'm glad to see that we either do or do not agree on that. All right.
We cross that,
Belgarath told them, and led them out onto the bridge that arched through the half-light to the other side. Garion glanced down once and saw a myriad of gleaming openings dotting the cavern walls far below. Schrodinger's word. The openings did not appear to have any systematic arrangement, but rather seemed scattered randomly. There must be a lot of people living here, he said to his grandfather. The old man nodded.
It's the home cave of one of the major Ulgo tribes, he replied.
The first disharmonic phrases of the ancient hymn to Ul drifted up to them as they neared the other end of the bridge.
I wish they'd find another tune,
Barak muttered sourly.
That one's starting to get on my nerves.
I'll mention that to the first Ulgo I meet, Silk told him lightly. I'm sure they'll be only too glad to change songs for you. Okay, you know what? I think this might end up being our first spot on the board.
Very funny,
Barak said. It probably hasn't occurred to them that their song isn't universally admired.
Do you mind?
Barak asked acidly. They've only been singing it for 5,000 years now. That'll do, Silk, Aunt Pole told the little man. Anything you say, great lady, Silk answered mockingly. Yeah, okay. That's it. That's the very sarcastic we were looking for. I'm gonna put a big old circle here. Whoa, Silk is very sarcastic. That was barely more sarcastic. There's the difference between one word and an entire exchange which was like visibly annoying another character, in which he had to be told to stop. I think that's enough for it to qualify. I'm sorry I didn't take your suggestion for the first one. You are using sarcasm ironically. And that he was cut off from Pole, yeah. I see. I read your thing wrong. That was barely more sarcastic. I gotcha. Okay. All right, so we've filled in our first spot on the board. Accursed text, you failed to represent my sarcasm. Should have used plain language and spoken like an Anglo-Saxon instead of using Latinate equivalents. Oh boy. That's a little reference for Mrs. Sharkey. Okay. They entered another gallery on the far side of the cavern and followed it until it branched. Belgarath firmly led them to the left. Yes, I caught that reference. She read the Check It Out this week. We got library nerds in the chat. They entered another gallery on the far side of the cavern and followed it until it branched. Belgarath firmly led them to the left. Are you sure? Silk asked. I could be wrong, but it seems like we're going in a circle.
We are.
I don't suppose you'd care to explain that.
There's a cavern we wanted to avoid, so we had to go around it.
Why did we have to avoid it?
It's unstable. The slightest sound there might bring the roof down.
Oh.
That's one of the dangers down here.
You don't really need to go into detail, old friend, Silk said, looking nervously at the roof above. The little man seemed to be talking more than usual, and Garion's own sense of oppression at the thought of all the rock surrounding him gave him a quick insight into Silk's mind. The sense of being closed in was unbearable to some men, and Silk, it appeared, was one of them. Garion glanced up also, and seemed to feel the weight of the mountain above pressing down firmly on him. Silk, he decided, might not be the only one disturbed by the thought of all that dreadful mass above them. Mrs. also talks more while nervous. Herriker's got something to show us. So, Silk is claustrophobic, it seems. That's a new piece of information. The gallery they followed opened out into a small cavern with a glass-clear lake in its center. You know, one of the bingo spaces should have been Garion is unusually insightful. That should have been one of the spots. How unrogue-like. The gallery they followed opened out into a small cavern with a glass-clear lake in its center. The lake was very shallow, and it had a white gravel bottom. An island rose from the center of the lake. Another similarity. And on the island stood a building constructed in the same curiously pyramidal shape as the buildings in the ruined city of Prolgu, far above. The building was surrounded by a ring of columns, and here and there, benches were carved from white stone. Alright, so maybe not that similar to The Hobbit. Sharkies thinks there's a difference of degree between not liking small spaces and being uncomfortable with the weight of an entire mountain above your head. That's fair. Claustrophobic might be the wrong choice of word. It is possible that I don't know the correct word to describe this particular fear or discomfort. I'm sure there must be something specifically for like a fear of being underground. Let's ask the internet. And the first thing that came up is claustrophobia. Apparently, claustrophobia is the fear of being trapped. And specifically, taphephobia, maybe? T-A-P-H-E? Taphephobia might be, is apparently the fear of being buried alive. But I don't think that that's necessarily what we're talking about here. Oh, here's one that might be it. This one's describing the fear of being underground, but it doesn't give a name, which is weird. Lunch break at work. Alright, thanks for visiting, Bear. Hopefully we'll catch you a little later, but have a good lunch. Maybe if Gollum stayed on his island and maybe put some money into his shack. And maybe if he built an entire pyramidal structure and some columns and some carved white stone benches. And maybe if his lake was a little cleaner. Alright, let's see. Gollum just needed to stop having all that avocado toast. Oh. Alright, here and there, benches were carved from white stone. Glowing crystal globes were suspended on long chains from the ceiling of the cavern, about 30 feet overhead, and their light, while still faint, was noticeably brighter than that in the galleries through which they had passed. A white marble causeway crossed to the island, and a very old man stood at its end, peering across the still water toward them as they entered the cavern.
Yad ho, Belgrath, the old man called. Groja ul. Gorim, Belgarath replied with a formal bow. Yad ho, Groja ul.
He led them across the marble causeway to the island in the center of the lake, and warmly clasped the old man's hand, speaking to him in the guttural Ulgo language. The Gorim of Ulgo appeared to be very old. He had long, silvery hair and beard, and his robe was snowy white. Does that phrasing sound a little odd? He had long, silvery hair and beard. I think what's weird about it to me is that you would say someone has long, silvery hair, but you wouldn't say someone has long, silvery beard, right? You would say they have a long, silvery beard. You wouldn't say they have long, silvery beard. It's Ulgo Santa. So with those combined together here, he had long, silvery hair and beard. That sounds not quite right. He's long of beard. I definitely needed to wait for the correction because I did not know what you were getting at there. On the other hand, he had a long silvery hair and beard. Sounds silly too. Yeah, no, that's not right either. So is the way that it's put here correct, or would this sentence need to be broken up entirely and phrased differently, is kind of what I'm wondering, in order for it to really be grammatically correct. Or is just, he had long silvery hair and beard, is that just grammatically correct? Because it feels wrong to me. And his robe was snowy white. There was a kind of saintly serenity about him that Garion felt immediately, and the boy knew, without knowing how he knew, that he was approaching a holy man, perhaps the holiest on earth. Under earth? It's using parallel phrases when they aren't usually parallel. The holiest man on earth. That's another interesting thing. I think we've discussed this before, but the world being referred to as Earth when it's not our Earth always feels a little odd. Also, the holiest man on Earth when they're under a mountain. You don't think it's grammatically wrong? Okay. I will bow to your expertise. Also, having the robe described in the same sentence kind of suggests that his robe color is due to age. I think it's more supposed to be describing him looking saintly, right? Let me read it from the beginning again. The Gorim of Ulgo appeared to be very old. He had long silvery hair and beard, and his robe was snowy white. I guess it did start off with old. There was a kind of saintly serenity about him that Garion felt immediately, and the boy knew, without knowing how he knew, that he was approaching a holy man, perhaps the holiest on earth. The Gorim extended his arms fondly to Aunt Pole, and she embraced him affectionately as they exchanged the ritual greeting. Yad ho, Groja ul.
Our companions don't speak your language, old friend, Belgarath said to the Gorim. Would it offend you if we conversed in the language of the outside?
The language of the outside. Now, I think that that's specifically speaking to an Ulgo underground here. I don't think... But still, that does kind of almost imply that there's just a single language outside. I would expect that the Angarax probably have another language, but possibly everyone from the west Maybe they all speak the same language. It implies a common, anyways. Yeah, it kind of does.
Not at all, Belgarath, the Gorim replied. Ul tells us that it's important for men to understand one another. Come inside, all of you. I've had food and drink prepared for you.
As the old man looked at each of them, Garion noticed that his eyes, unlike those of the other Ulgos he had seen, were a deep, almost violet blue. Then the Gorim turned and led them along a path to the doorway of the pyramid-shaped building. That's interesting.
Has the child come yet?
Belgarath asked the Gorim as they passed through the massive stone doorway.
The Gorim sighed. No, Belgarath, not yet, and I am very weary. There's hope at each birth, but after a few days, the eyes of the child darken. It appears that Ul is not finished with me yet. Don't give up hope, Gorim, Belgarath told his friend. The child will come, in Ul's own time. So we are told.
The Gorim sighed again.
The tribes are growing restless, though, and there's bickering, and worse, in some of the farther galleries. The zealots grow bolder in their denunciations, and strange aberrations and cults have begun to appear. Ulgo needs a new Gorim. I've outlived my time by 300 years. Ul still has work for you, Belgarath replied. His ways are not ours, Gorim, and he sees time in a different way.
He's outlived his time by 300 years. Eric are pointing out the world. This is definitely a world leader, but we haven't had Garion actually interacting with him yet. So I'm going to wait for that at least to happen before I fill in that spot. So far we've only had kind of a description from Garion of the Gorim. Excuse me. The room they entered was square. Yeah, exactly. Like Garion is in a king's court and doesn't know how to behave himself. That's come up a few times in various kingdoms. Yeah, fair enough. Some of these descriptions on the card had to be kind of truncated in order to fit in the spaces from their original descriptions. The room they entered was square, but had, nonetheless, the slightly sloping walls characteristic of Ulgo architecture. A stone table with low benches on either side sat in the center of the room, and there were a number of bowls containing fruit sitting upon it. Among the bowls sat several tall flasks and round crystal cups. I'm told that winter has come early to our mountains, the Gorim said to them. The drink should help to warm you. It's chilly outside, Belgarath admitted. They sat down on the benches and began to eat. The fruit was tangy and wild-tasting, and the clear liquid in the flasks was fiery and brought an immediate warm glow that radiated out from the stomach.
"Forgive us our customs, which may seem strange to you," the Gorham said, noting that Barak and Hetar, in particular, approached the meal of fruit with a distinct lack of enthusiasm. "We are a people much tied to ceremony. We begin our meals with fruit in remembrance of the years we spent wandering in search of Ul. The meat will come in due time."
"Where do you obtain such food in these caves, Holy One?" Silk asked politely.
"Our gatherers go out of the caves at night," the Gorham replied. "They tell us that the fruits and grains they bring back with them grow wild in the mountains, but I suspect that they have long since taken up the cultivation of certain fertile valleys. They also maintain that the meat they carry down to us is the flesh of wild cattle taken in the hunt, but I have my doubts about that as well."
He smiled gently.
I permit them their little deceptions."
Perhaps emboldened by the Gorham's geniality, Dernick raised a question that had obviously been bothering him since he had entered the city on the mountaintop above.
"Forgive me, Your Honor," he began, "but why do your builders make everything crooked? What I mean is, nothing seems to be square. It all leans over."
What do you think? Does that count? He's being polite about it. I don't think it's people. It's wild cattle, they said.
"It has to do with weight and support, I understand," the Gorham replied. "Each wall is actually falling down, but since they're all falling against each other, none of them can move so much as a finger's width. And, of course, their shape reminds us of the tents we lived in during our wanderings."
Dernick frowned thoughtfully, struggling with the alien idea. Sharkies think that counts? Does that count, everyone? Let's take a vote. Was that Dernick being judgy, but should I fill in the space? Okay, that's two for judginess. Ereker, Robot Kyo, any thoughts? He was still feeling it was wrong after having an explanation. Well, it says he was struggling with the... What's the scale like? It said he was struggling with the alien idea, which I think is him trying to understand, like, the mechanics of it. Robakiro is abstaining. Alright, well, in that case, I think that just gives us a majority vote. So, I'm going to fill it in. It's definitely not the judgiest. Usually it's more when somebody behaves in a fashion that Dernick finds immoral. Yeah, like Farmo says, normally it's like people are dressing scantily. But good enough. Dernick does not approve of Ulgo architecture. Sounded a little Hulk smash there for some reason, but... This isn't how things should be built. He could have politely ceded to their obviously better understanding of the physics of arches. Well, this was more their, like, pyramid shapes. You know, they're everything is kind of falling against each other, which is related. The bridges were arches, but everything else I think is sort of pyramid-like. Were they Were they Archie-ing? Were they Archie-ing? Archie-ing? I don't get your joke. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Erica. Arcing. Arching. Arching. Arcing. We talked about how to pronounce it. I'm going to continue reading. Apparently I'm just not understanding Erica today. I'm sorry. It's my fault. You made a confounding typo. Read your book. All right. Let's see, where were we? Dernick frowned thoughtfully, struggling with the alien idea.
And have you as yet recovered Aldor's orb, Belgarath?
The Gorham inquired then, his face growing serious.
Not yet, Belgarath replied. We chased Zedar as far as Nyissa, but when he crossed over into Cthul Murgos, Ktuchik was waiting and took the orb away from him. Ktuchik has it now at Rak Cthul. And Zedar? He escaped Ktuchik's ambush and carried Torak off to Cthul Mishrak in Meloria to keep Ktuchik from raising him with the orb. Then you'll have to go to Rak Cthul.
Belgarath nodded as an Ulgo serving man brought in a huge, steaming roast, set it on the table, and left with a respectful bow. A lot of, I don't know, proper nouns in that last sentence from Belgarath, that last paragraph. Zedar, Nyissa, Cthul Murgos, Ktuchik, Rak Cthul, Cthul Mishrak. A lot of proper nouns, foreign sounding proper nouns.
Has anyone found out how Zedar was able to take the orb without being struck down?
The Gorham asked. He used a child, Aunt Pole told him, an innocent.
Ah,
the Gorham stroked his beard thoughtfully.
Doesn't the prophecy say, and the child shall deliver up the birthright unto the chosen one?
Yes, Belgarath replied.
Where's the child now?
So far as we know, Ktuchik has him at Rak Cthul.
Will you assault Rak Cthul then?
I'd need an army, and it could take years to reduce that fortress. There's another way, I think. A certain passage in the Darine Codex speaks of caves under Rak Cthul.
I know that passage, Belgarath. It's very obscure. It could mean that, I suppose, but what if it doesn't?
It's confirmed by the Mrin Codex, Belgarath said a little defensively.
The Mrin Codex is even worse, old friend. It's obscure to the point of being gibberish.
I think this is Belgarath speaking.
I somehow have the feeling that when we look back at it, after all this is over, we're going to find that the Mrin Codex is the most accurate version of all. I do have certain other verification, however. Back during the time when the Murgos were constructing Rak Cthul, a Sendarian slave escaped and made his way back to the west. He was delirious when he was found, but he kept talking of caves under the mountain before he died. Not only that, Anheg of Cherek found a copy of the Book of Torak that contains a fragment of a very old Gorlim prophecy. Guard well the temple, above and beneath, for Cthrag Yaska will summon foes down from the air or up from the earth to bear it away again. That's even more obscure, the Gorem objected.
To be fair to Belgarath here, he is citing, like, he's really dragging up a lot of different sources here. We're at 4 now. He's got 2 different prophecies, the Book of Torak, and a report from a delirious escaped Sendarian slave. Still, that's 4. So I don't think he's being 100% sure here. I think he even started out with, there's another way, I think, and then he says a passage speaks of caves under. Anyways, that's even more obscure, the Gorem objected.
Grolim prophecies usually are, but it's all I've got to work with. If I reject the notion of caves under Arak Thol, I'll have to lay siege to the place. It would take all the armies of the west to do that, and then Ktuchik would summon the Angarak armies to defend the city. Everything points to some final battle, but I'd prefer to pick the time and place. And the wasteland of Murgos is definitely not one of the places I'd choose.
Yeah, there's that.
You're leading someplace with this, aren't you?
Belgarath nodded.
I need a diviner to help me find the caves beneath Rakthol and to lead me up through them to the city.
A diviner, D-I-V-I-N-E-R, one who divines things. That's true. It's a 1 in a million chance, but it just might work. The Gorem shook his head.
You're asking the impossible, Belgarath. The diviners are all zealots, mystics. You'll never persuade one of them to leave the holy caverns here beneath Prolgu, particularly not now. All of Ulgo is waiting for the coming of the child, and every zealot is firmly convinced that he will be the one to discover the child and reveal him to the tribes. I couldn't even order one of them to accompany you. The diviners are regarded as holy men, and I have no authority over them. It may not be as hard as you think, Gorim.
Belgarath pushed back his plate and reached for his cup.
The diviner I need is one named Relg.
Does that name sound familiar to anyone? There's only one obscure place where it's come up before, and that is on the map. That's right. Right there.
Relg? He's the worst of the lot. He's gathered a following, and he preaches to them by the hour in some of the far galleries. He believes that he's the most important man in Ulgo just now. You'll never persuade him to leave these caves. I don't think I'll have to, Gorim. I'm not the one who selected Relg. That decision was made for me long before I was born. Just send for him. I'll send for him if you want, the Gorim said doubtfully. I don't think he'll come, though.
He'll come, Aunt Pole told him confidently, He won't know why, but he'll come. And he will go with us, Gorim. The same power that brought us all together will bring him as well. He doesn't have any more choice in the matter than we do. Relg, R-E-L-G. 4 letters. And that was actually the end of chapter 16. $8.40. I'm hearing like Grell, Rill. He's just a regular guy. He's just a regular guy. I didn't even read it the way you wrote it at first. What does everyone think? Is it cake time? Cake o'clock? If I wait any longer, it's going to be too late for cake. What do you think, Farmhouse? Should I go and get it, or do you want to? Me, okay. Cake, give him the cake. All right, give me a minute, everyone. I'll be right back. Oh boy. There's that. Let's see, something in here? No? Do I need to go upstairs to find what I'm looking for? Yeah. Hang on just a minute, everyone. I'm working on it. Okay, almost done. Here I come. Oh, here we go. Happy birthday to the stream. Happy birthday to the stream. I hope I don't get a sparkler in the eye. Happy birthday to the stream. Woo, sparks. Whee! Ta-da! Happy stream day. 1 whole year of reading books with you guys. And look at this cake. Not sure if you can tell, but it is a book. See, you can see the pages. And this is the spine over here. Yeah, there's the spine of the book. Maybe if let me just tilt the camera down a little. The classic sprinkle spine. Yeah, you get that all the time in the library, right? Yay! A whole year. Twice a week, almost every week. You'd not be surprised to find a return with sprinkles on the spine. And I think on average, because we did start out for a few weeks doing 3 times a week, so I wouldn't be surprised if on average it was actually more than 2 times a week. I have missed a couple, but not very many. We've been pretty consistent with this stream over the past year. Make a wish. I guess I should probably blow out the candle, huh? Oh boy. So we're also most likely over 100 episodes. I wonder if there's an easy way for me to check, but yeah, I would guess. I'll have to look that up. Oh, a wish, huh? Are they all on YouTube? Yeah, just about everyone. The only ones that aren't on YouTube are the ones where I didn't actually end up reading. Where, you know, people didn't really show up, and so I didn't feel like I should actually read that stream. But even for those, you know, I was here, I just hung out for a while. Count my YouTube uploads. That's probably the best way to do it. My wish. Should I tell you all what my wish is, or should I just blow out the candle and keep the wish to myself? Why doesn't everybody make a wish with me? Ready? Y'all want to blow out the candle with me? I'll count down from 3. 3, 2, 1. You will also spit on the cake. It's a weird tradition, isn't it? Alright. I'm gonna take this over here. Back to the kitchen. I don't suppose Farmhouse could cut some slices. Please. Thank you. COVID safe. 97 uploads on YouTube. So we're closing in on 100 for YouTube. This would be number 98 then. And I think there's been at least 1 or 2 that I would have not uploaded where it was just... There haven't been very many. There have been very few where I've done a stream and not recorded. And again, those would have only been ones where I just really didn't end up doing any reading. But it's possible there's been 2 of those. There's been at least 1, maybe 2. So I've probably done over 100 Twitch streams, but we're very close to 100 YouTube streams, which is pretty cool as well. Oh yeah, right, and then there would have been the ones where we voted on things, and I did not upload those. I didn't record those at all. So yeah, definitely over 100 Twitch streams, but almost 100 YouTube uploads. So that's pretty cool. That's a lot. I wonder how much time I've spent in front of this camera. Oh, I am warm. I'm gonna have to get some more drink. Well, thanks for sticking it out with me. It's neat that we've spent that much time doing this. Oh, look at that. Ooh. Looks like cherry bits in there. Chocolate and a layer of frosting in the middle. That is pretty nice. Is that cherry? Yes, cherries. Looks tasty. I am sorry that I cannot share, everybody. Also, I love cola balls. Is that weird? Does anybody else feel like a weird, like, I don't know, just satisfies that urge to chew on ball bearings, but also tastes like cola? I definitely liked them like back when I was a kid. Um, when I was quite young, like in preschool even. The preschool I went to this preschool that was in this like old brick building. Um, and just around the corner from it was this like very old candy store that had just all kinds of like, you know, they had like those rock candies on wooden sticks, and things like that, and they had all the like bins up at the counter full of different things. And even then, I would be like, I wanted cola balls frequently because it was like, it's like having a bag of. They had like larger ones too. But yeah, bag of cola flavored ball bearings that you can chow down on. It's the ancient urge. Too hard for Robot Q? Well, you don't have to chew them, you know. Alright. It smells very chocolatey. Ow. It's very good. Yep. It's delicious cake. Thank you, Farmhouse, for making a delicious chocolate cake. How Robot Q would get rock candy on sticks going to Science World. Did they have them in the gift shop there, or was it somewhere nearby that you get it from? Oh, I remember. I definitely am aware of chicken bones. The candy. I'm thinking of like two different things as far as, you know, I'm gonna look up a picture. Chicken bones candy. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. I didn't remember them being so vibrantly pink. It looks like all of them are very pink. Oh, and according to this, they are uniquely Canadian. Yeah, it looks like a lot of these pages refer to them as being Canadian. I did not know they were a Canadian candy. That's interesting. They're very pink. Some of these pictures. Since 1885. Oh, right, and they've got like chocolate in the middle. Hard, spicy, cinnamon flavored pink candy shell with semi sweet chocolate center. That is pretty weird, I will admit. That is a strange combo. Dishwasher making noise. Erica's mom loves those. I'll have to remember that. I'll see if I can find them sometime to get as a present. Alright. I'm going to go on to chapter 17. The ones you've had from Dickens were peanut butter and chocolate. With the same pink shell, or are they just different entirely? One of the pictures on my image search was a little different looking, but almost all the rest were the like bright pink candy. Same pink shells, sometimes covered in coconut. Oh. Oh, peanut butter and coconut. I don't know why I just defaulted, kind of replaced coconut with chocolate when I was reading it. I've got chocolate cake, I was reading about chocolate. Chocolate on the brain, okay? All right. Oh, guess what, everyone? Chapter 17. It all seemed so tedious. The snow and cold they had endured on the journey to Prolgu had numbed Senedra, and the warmth here in the caverns made her drowsy. The endless, obscure talk of Belgarath and the strange, frail old Gorim seemed to pull her towards sleep. Senedra chapter. Those were pretty rare, and look at that. Mid-book Senedra chapter. So that defeats what I was saying about how it's pretty much only ever the first chapters, like first few chapters of a book that are from her point of view. This one's mid-book. We have not had one since the beginning of this book. And we are over halfway through now. Nice. Oh yeah, I assume that this cake is also gluten-free. I cannot tell based on the taste, so that's good. The peculiar singing began again somewhere, echoing endlessly through the caves, and that too lulled her. Only a lifetime of training in the involved etiquette of court behavior kept her awake. That's definitely a thing. Being warm and quiet but with repetitive sounds and things like that, that definitely can make for sleepy times. The journey had been ghastly for Senedra. What do we have for Senedra? We've got watching Garion, nonsense arguments, issuing orders. In theory, we've also got, the ones for anyone, like crying. Oh, I haven't been paying too close attention, but I don't think we've encountered a bard yet. The journey had been ghastly for Senedra. Tol Honeth was a warm city, and she was not accustomed to cold weather. It seemed that her feet would never be warm again. She had also discovered a world filled with shocks, terrors, and unpleasant surprises. At the Imperial Palace in Tol Honeth, the enormous power of her father, the Emperor, had shielded her from danger of any kind. But now, she felt vulnerable. In a rare moment of absolute truth with herself, she admitted that much of her spiteful behavior toward Garion had grown out of her dreadful new sense of insecurity. Her safe, pampered little world had been snatched away from her, and she felt exposed, unprotected, and afraid. Poor Garion, she thought. He was such a nice boy. She felt a little ashamed that he had been the one who'd had to suffer from her bad temper. She promised herself that soon, very soon, she would sit down with him and explain it all. He was a sensible boy, and he'd be sure to understand. That, of course, would immediately patch up the rift which had grown between them. Feeling her eyes on him, he glanced once at her and then looked away with apparent indifference. Senedra's eyes hardened like agates. How dared he? She made a mental note of it and added it to her list of his many imperfections. I like how it didn't even say that she was looking at him. It just had her thinking about him, and then he noticed that she was looking at him. Sinedra weirdly watches Garion. That definitely qualifies. She watched him so weirdly that it didn't even mention she was watching him. We have not gotten angst yet. Even though it's like, sort of the free space. But it hasn't really come up yet. The frail-looking old Gorim had sent one of the strange, silent Ulgos to fetch the man he and Belgrath and Lady Polgara had been discussing. And then they turned to more general topics. "Were you able to pass through the mountains unmolested?" the Gorim asked.
"We had a few encounters."
Barak, the big, red-bearded Earl of Trelheim, responded with what seemed to Sinedra gross understatement. Phrasing felt a little odd. "But, thanks to Ul, you're all safe," the Gorim declared piously. "Which of the monsters are still abroad at this season? I haven't been out of the caves in years, but as I recall, most of them seek their lairs when the snow begins." "We encountered Hrulgin, Holy One," Baron Mandaralin informed him, "and some Algroths. And there was an Eldrak." "The Eldrak was troublesome," Silk said dryly. "Understandably. Fortunately, there aren't very many Eldrakin. They're fearsome monsters." "We noticed that," Silk said. "Which one was it?"
"Gruul,"
Belgarath replied.
"He and I had met before, and he seemed to hold a grudge. I'm sorry, Gorim, but we had to kill him. There wasn't any other way."
"Ah," the Gorim said, with a slight note of pain in his voice. "Poor Gruul."
"I personally don't miss him very much,"
Barak said.
"I'm not trying to be forward, Holy One, but don't you think it might be a good idea to exterminate some of the more troublesome beasts in these mountains?"
You know what? I did not think we were going to get Barak suggests violence in the holy caves of Ul. But there it is. Barak suggests violence. I wasn't expecting that one. Wow. That, casually suggests violence, yeah. That's pretty good. Barak just, oh boy, that's great. "They're the children of Ul, even as we," the Gorim explained.
"But if they weren't out there, you could return to the world above,"
Barak pointed out. The Gorim smiled at that. "No," he said gently. "Ulgo will never leave the caves now. We've dwelt here for 5 millennia, and, over the years, we've changed. Our eyes could not bear the sunlight now.
The monsters above cannot reach us here, and their presence in the mountains keeps strangers out of Ulgo. We are not at ease with strangers, really, so it's probably for the best.
I've noticed a few times now, I'll get a flicker on like the recording side of things on my screen, and then as the stream catches up on my like actual like web window, which I've also got open, then it flickers there as well. So there's something going on my side of things. It's probably got to do with having multiple cameras running, taxing the program or something like that. Auto refresh feature maybe. It's like the whole screen kind of like flashes briefly. Like not just the focus of the camera. I mean, maybe it could be, but I'm not sure. Alright, so.
We're not at ease with strangers, really, so it's probably for the best.
The Gorim was sitting directly across the narrow stone table from Sinedra. The subject of the monsters obviously pained him, and he looked at her for a moment, then gently reached out his frail old hand and cupped her little chin in it, lifting her face to the dim light of the hanging globe suspended above the table.
All of the alien creatures are not monsters,
he said, his large violet eyes calm and very wise.
Consider the beauty of this dryad.
Sinedra was a little startled, not by his touch, certainly, for older people had responded to her flower-like face with that same gesture for as long as she could remember, but rather by the ancient man's immediate recognition of the fact that she was not entirely human.
Tell me, child, the Gorim asked, do the dryads still honor Ul?
She was completely unprepared for the question.
I'm sorry, Holy One, she floundered. Until quite recently, I'd not even heard of the god Ul. For some reason, my tutors have very little information about your people or your god.
The princess was raised as a Tolnedran, Lady Polgara explained. She's a Borun. I'm sure you've heard of the link between that house and the Dryads. As a Tolnedran, her religious affiliation is to Nedra.
A serviceable god, the Gorim said. Perhaps a bit stuffy for my taste, but certainly adequate. The Dryads themselves, though, do they still know their god?
A little picky there, Gorim. For anyone who wasn't here when I was explaining, this space here, the oh hey god, is for if a god actually makes an appearance. So I'm not counting just talking about gods, even though this is a pretty involved conversation. The man in a cave said another god is too stuffy. Yeah, and do you remember the description of Ul? He shot down the original Gorim like 8 times. No, go find another god. I'm not going to do it.
Do they still know their god?
Belgarath coughed, a bit apologetically.
I'm afraid not, Gorim. They've drifted away.
And now there was that flashing I was just talking about. I don't know if that showed up for everybody.
They've drifted away, and the eons have erased what they know of Ul. They're flighty creatures anyway, not much given to religious observances.
The Gorim's face was sad.
What god do they honor now? None, actually, Belgarath admitted. They have a few sacred groves, a rough idol or two fashioned from the root of a particularly venerated tree. That's about it. They don't really have any clearly formulated theology.
Sinedra found the whole discussion a trifle offensive. Rising to the occasion, she drew herself up slightly and smiled winsomely at the old Gorham. She knew exactly how to charm an elderly man. She'd practiced for years on her father. I feel the shortcomings of my education most keenly, Holy One, she lied. I love that. It's not she said, it's she lied. Old men mansplaining the Dryad's beliefs. I mean, technically. Since mysterious Ul is the hereditary god of the Dryads, I should know him. I hope that someday soon I may receive instruction concerning him. It may be that I, unworthy though I am, can be the instrument of renewing the allegiance of my sisters to their rightful god. It was an artful little speech, and on the whole Sinedra was rather proud of it. To her surprise, however, the Gorham was not satisfied to accept a vague expression of interest and let it go at that. Tell your sisters that the core of our faith is to be found in the Book of Ulgo, he told her seriously. The Book of Ulgo, she repeated. I must remember that. As soon as I return to Tol Honeth, I'll obtain a copy and deliver it to the Wood of the Dryads personally. That, she thought, should satisfy him. I'm afraid that such copies... Sorry? I'm afraid that such copies as you'd find in Tol Honeth would be much corrupted, the Gorham told her. The tongue of my people is not easily understood by strangers, and translations are difficult. Sinedra definitely felt that the dear old man was becoming just a bit tiresome about the whole thing. As is so often the case with scriptures, he was saying, our holy book is bound up in our history. The wisdom of the gods is such that their instruction is concealed within stories. Our minds delight in the stories, and the messages of the gods are implanted thus. All unaware, we are instructed even as we are entertained. Sinedra was familiar with the theory. Master Jeebers, her tutor, had lectured her tediously concerning it. She cast about rather desperately, trying to find some graceful way to change the subject. Jeebers Creebers. Oh, Sharky's saying as a theology student that tracks. It's also, we don't get too many references to the fact that Sinedra is actually highly educated for, her age and for the world she lives in. But she is, as she doesn't let people forget, an imperial princess. And the second time we met her, it was in the company of her tutor, Jeebers Creebers. Our story is very old, the Gorham continued inexorably. Would you like to hear it? Caught by her own cleverness, Sinedra could only nod helplessly. And so the Gorham began. Everybody ready for a history lesson? A religious history lesson, no less. Oh, there's that flashing again. What the heck?
At the beginning of days, when the world was spun out of darkness by the wayward gods, there dwelt in the silences of the heavens a spirit known only as Ul.
Is inexorably not an unusual descriptive word. You know, I thought it when I saw it. I don't know. It's definitely... I can see an argument for it. I guess it's probably not a very everyday word, right? It's something like, I think it's a word that comes up fairly frequently if you read books. As far as that thing goes, that spot, where is it? It's like down here, right there. As far as that spot goes, there was a part where they were climbing up into the mountains and they were in these pine trees, and the air was described as like cool and spicy. And so we all kind of went, it's what now? Living in the forests of BC, it's what now? And that's not necessarily the only thing I would accept for filling in that spot. Because there are also, like, a word that was more noticeably out of place. Yeah, like, there have been some other ones that I think are just... Farmos was mentioning earlier, like turgid or turgid waters, or torpid waters, or they mentioned scudding clouds. Like, I don't know, there are some strange descriptive words, and I feel like inexorably doesn't feel that out of place to me. So I'll fill in that space if people think I should, but otherwise, my thought is that inexorably isn't quite weird enough. All right. Well, we'll wait and see if something a little stranger comes up. I'm guessing it will.
A spirit known only as Ul.
In utter dismay, Sinedra realized that he fully intended to recite the entire book to her. After a few moments of chagrin, however, she began to feel the strangely compelling quality of his story. More than she would have cared to admit, she was moved by the first Gorim's appeal to the indifferent spirit that appeared to him at Prolgu. What manner of man would thus dare to accuse a god? So I think what it's doing here is the actual prologue of this book is the story that the Gorim is now reading. So it's going to kind of skip and skim over this story because we've already read it early on. As she listened, a faint flicker seemed to tug at the corner of her eye. She glanced toward it and saw a soft glow somewhere deep within the mass of rocks that formed one of the walls of the chamber. The glow was peculiarly different from the dim light of the hanging crystal globes.
Then the heart of Gorim was made glad, the old man continued his recitation. And he called the name of the high place where all this had come to pass Prolgu, which is holy place. And he departed from Prolgu and returned unto...
Ya! Garak Tek Gorim! The words were spat out in the snarling Ulgo language, and the harsh voice that spoke them was filled with outrage. Sinedra jerked her head around to look at the intruder. Like all Ulgos, he was short, but his arms and shoulders were so massively developed that he seemed almost deformed. His colorless hair was tangled and unkempt. He wore a hooded leather smock, stained and smeared with some kind of mud, and his large black eyes burned with fanaticism. Crowded behind him were a dozen or more other Ulgos, their faces set in expressions of shock and righteous indignation. Ulgos are ripped, especially this one. The fanatic in the leather smock continued his stream of crackling vituperation. Okay. Now this is a word that I know, vituperation. It basically means like acidic, you know. Are you sneaking around? Let's see. I'll just do, yeah, I think you can get by. Vituperation. Pretty pretentious word. Roat Keogh's never heard that one. Vituperation. And I could be mispronouncing it a bit. Could be more like Vitu or Vitu. There was a centipede. Weird. Yeah. So it's got. I'm pretty sure the root of this word has to do with like acid. Yeah, the definition is bitter and abusive language. And then let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? The abusive criticism, yeah. What's the word for the root of etymology is what I'm looking for. Yeah, let's see. It looks like it comes from the Latin vitium for fault. Vitupere from vitium, fault, plus parare, prepare. Okay. It's not mentioning... I'm sure there's like another use of the word that has to do... Vituperation. Vitriol. Another way I've seen the word used is like vitreous or... anyways. Vitriol. Yeah, vitriol, vitriolic. Yeah. For sure. And I'm sure they must be related. Anyways, I'm thinking now this one has been enough of a discussion that counts. Does everyone agree that this space should get filled in now? It's not used in an unusual fashion. It's used in in a normal way, but it is a pretty unusual word. Erica's saying to wait. All right, we got 1 for, 1 against. Alright, well, I'm going to give it a little circle here. I'm going to put a little circle. I'm going to count it for purposes of bingo, but I'm going to leave space so that if there's a word used in a weird spot, like spicy air, that we can fill that spot in even more. But for the purposes of we're going for a bingo, I'm going to count it. I feel like I keep shooting down Erica and then like within a page filling it in with something that's only slightly different from her original suggestion. All right. Crackling. What was it? Vituperation or something? Vituperation, yeah. I have needed to shoot you down because you didn't understand the context. Alright. I'm glad you're not offended. You were just going off inexorably. The Gorim's face set, but he endured the abuse from the wild-eyed man at the door patiently. This could also be leading us toward a nonsense argument. I don't know if this is exactly counting, But let's keep an eye on it and keep that in mind. We could get a double here. Finally, when the fanatic paused for breath, the frail old man turned to Belgarath. "This is Relg," he said, a bit apologetically. "You see what I mean about him. Trying to convince him of anything is impossible."
"What use would he be to us?"
Barak demanded, obviously irritated by the newcomer's attitude.
"He can't even speak a civilized tongue."
Oh. Barak. Come on now, don't be racist. New voice upcoming, yeah. It's another voice that's described as being harsh. Why are all of the voices harsh and guttural? And when they're not, I make them that way anyways. Barak keeps being judgy. Yeah. Yeah, if Dernick didn't earn that judgy spot, Barak has filled in a bit. Relg glared at him. Alright. Let's see. I need a voice for Relg. Nasal and harsh? Nasal? I don't picture Relg as nasal. Like, yeah. I don't know. That would be different, but I don't know if it's appropriate for Relg. Is that how you picture him sounding when you read this? Or raspy? It reminds me I'm almost out of water. I don't usually actually drain this mug, but it's also very warm. I don't remember what that guy sounded like. Alright. Let's see. Relg glared at him.
"I speak your language, foreigner."
How's that? He said with towering contempt. It's definitely different from most of them. Doesn't seem quite right. Didn't Farmos Sharkies think it works? Be a little bit less low-pitched. I can try.
"But I choose not to defile the holy caverns with its unsanctified mouthings."
He turned back to Gorim.
"Who gave you the right to speak the words of the holy book to unbelieving foreigners?"
He demanded. Mouthings is a weird word? Yeah. Mouthings is a weird word. Unsanctified mouthings. Yeah. That's definitely not a part of my vocabulary. If the previous one didn't get us the bingo spot, that one did. Alright. I'll fill that one in now. Unsanctified mouthings. The gentle old Gorim's eyes hardened slightly. It does imply there are sanctified mouthings. Oh, Relg, you done pissed off what has been described as perhaps the holiest person on this world.
"I think that's about enough, Relg,"
he said firmly.
"Whatever idiocies you babble in out-of-the-way galleries to those gullible enough to listen is your concern. But what you say to me in my house is mine. I am still Gorim in Ulgo, whatever you may think, and I am not required to answer to you."
He looked past Relg at the shocked faces of the zealot's followers.
"This is not a general audience,"
he informed Relg.
"You were summoned here. They were not. Send them away."
As with many characters that have been introduced, people's first impressions of Relg not very good. And I don't blame you.
They came to be sure you intended me no harm,
Relg replied stiffly.
I have spoken the truth about you, and powerful men fear the truth.
Oh boy, Sharkies, it is sounding like you might be right.
Relg,
the Gorim said in an icy voice.
I don't think you could even begin to realize how indifferent I am to anything you might have said about me. Now, send them away, or would you rather have me do it? They won't obey you,
Relg sneered.
I am their leader.
The Gorim's eyes narrowed, and he rose to his feet. Then he spoke in the Ulgo tongue directly to Relg's adherents. Sinedra could not understand his words, but she did not really need to. She recognized the tone of authority instantly, and she was a bit startled at how absolutely the saintly old Gorim used it. Not even her father would have dared speak in that tone. The men crowded behind Relg looked nervously at each other and began to back away, their faces frightened. The Gorim barked one final command, and Relg's followers turned and fled. That flickering keeps happening. They won't listen to you. Let's see about that. Relg scowled after them and seemed for a moment on the verge of raising his voice to call them back, but apparently thought better of it.
You go too far, Gorim, he accused. That authority is not meant to be used in worldly matters. That authority is mine, Relg, the Gorim replied, and it's up to me to decide when it's required. You've chosen to confront me on theological ground. Therefore, I needed to remind your followers, and you, just who I am. Why have you summoned me here? Relg demanded. The presence of these unsanctified ones is an affront to my purity. I require your service, Relg, the Gorim told him. These strangers go to battle against our ancient foe.
That's capitalized ancient foe.
The one accursed above all others. The fate of the world hangs upon their quest, and your aid is needed. What do I care about the world?
Relg's voice was filled with contempt. Relg sounds lovely to hang out with.
And what do I care about maimed Torak? I am safe within the hand of Ul. He has need of me here, and I will not go from the holy caverns to risk defilement in the lewd company of unbelievers and monsters. The entire world will be defiled if Torak gains dominion over it.
Nope. I need to rewind that.
The entire world will be defiled if Torak gains dominion over it,
Belgarath pointed out.
And if we fail, Torak will become king of the world. He will not reign in Ulgo,
Relg retorted. How little you know him, Polgara murmured.
I will not leave the caves,
Relg insisted. What? That's a reference I am not understanding. Sharkies, what are you talking about?
I will not leave the caves, Relg insisted. The coming of the child is at hand, and I have been chosen to reveal him to Ulgo, and to guide and instruct him until he is ready to become Gorim. How interesting, the Gorim observed dryly. Just who was it who advised you of your election? Ul spoke to me, Relg declared.
Had a clearer picture of an uninvited Relg? Okay. I see. All right.
Odd. The caverns respond universally to the voice of Ul. All Ulgo would have heard his voice. He spoke to me in my heart,
Relg replied quickly.
What a curious thing for him to do,
the Gorim answered mildly.
All of this is beside the point,
Belgarath said brusquely.
I'd prefer to have you join us willingly, Relg. But, willing or not, you will join us. A power greater than any of us commands it. You can argue and resist as much as you like, but when we leave here, you'll be going with us.
Relg spat.
Never! I will remain here in the service of Ul, and of the child who will become the Gorim of Ulgo. And if you try to compel me, my followers will not permit it. Why do we need this blind mole, Belgarath?
Barak asked.
He's just going to be an aggravation to us. I've noticed that men who spend all their time congratulating themselves on their sanctity tend to be very poor companions. And what can this one do that I can't?
Relg looked at the red-bearded giant with disdain.
Big men with big mouths seldom have big brains, he said. Watch closely, hairy one.
He walked over to the sloping wall of the chamber.
Can you do this?
He asked, and slowly pushed his hand directly into the rock, as if he were sinking it into water. Silk whistled with amazement and moved quickly over to the wall beside the fanatic. As Relg pulled his hand out of the rock, Silk reached out to put his own hand on the precise spot. "How did you do that?" he demanded, shoving at the stones. Relg laughed harshly and turned his back. Oh, Sharkies, that is... Some things never change, I guess.
That's the ability that makes him useful to us, Silk,
Belgarath explained.
Relg's a diviner. He finds caves, and we need to locate the caves under Rakthol. If necessary, Relg can walk through solid rock to find them for us.
How could anyone do that? Silk asked, still staring at the spot where Relg had sunk his hand into the wall. I'm thinking this is close to disbelief. It's not... Silk doesn't disbelieve it, but he's definitely astonished. It's close, though.
It has to do with the nature of matter,
the sorcerer replied.
What we see as solid isn't really all that impenetrable.
Either something's solid or it's not, Silk insisted. Oh, we're getting closer. His face baffled.
Solidity's an illusion,
Belgarath told him.
Relg can slip the bits and pieces that make up his substance through the spaces that exist between the bits and pieces that make up the substance of the rock.
Can you do it? Silk demanded skeptically.
Belgarath shrugged. I don't know. I've never had occasion to try. Anyway, Relg can smell caves, and he goes straight to them. He probably doesn't know himself how he does it. I am led by my sanctity, Relg declared arrogantly. Perhaps that's it, the sorcerer agreed with a tolerant smile. The holiness of the caves draws me, since I am drawn to all holy things, Relg rasped on. And for me to leave the caverns of Ulgo would be to turn my back on holiness and move toward defilement. We'll see, Belgarath told him.
The glow in the rock wall, which Sinedra had noticed before, began to shimmer and pulsate, and the princess seemed to see a dim shape within the rocks. Then, as if the stones were only air, the shape became distinct and stepped out into the chamber. For just a moment, it seemed that the figure was an old man, bearded and robed like the Gorim, although much more robust. Then, Sinedra was struck by an overpowering sense of something more than human. With an awed shudder, she realized that she was in the presence of divinity. Relg gaped at the bearded figure, and he began to tremble violently. With a strangled cry, he prostrated himself. The figure looked calmly at the groveling zealot. Rise, Relg, it said in a soft voice that seemed to carry all the echoes of eternity in it, and the caverns outside rang with the sound of that voice. Rise, Relg, and serve thy god. Oh, hey, God. We're doing pretty well. I'm very surprised that we haven't had anything that I would fully quantify as angst just yet. Relg maybe has come close a little bit, but he's more arrogant than angst. What's our closest line so far? We've only got 2, I think, in any direction. We've got 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. And that, I think, is it. So we're still missing 3 on any line. Not any line, but any of those lines in order to qualify. If angst is a free space, I don't think it really is free. I just think it's as close to free as we're gonna get, in that it's gonna come up. You know it's gonna come up. We're getting pretty late. It's 9:45. We're on chapter 18. Normally I would definitely stop here. The next chapter is very short, however. Well, I say very short. It's like 8 pages. Because it goes from 191 to 200, but there's a gap missing on 191 that is larger than the amount of text on 200. So I think it's more 8 than 9 pages. So what do we think? It is the 1 year, but it is also getting a little later in the evening. Should I read chapter 18, which would also finish up this part of the book? Erica was about to head out. That's 1 vote against, I guess, kind of. What does everyone else think? Should I keep going or should we stop? Sharkies are done too? All right. It is pretty late. This has been a fun anniversary stream, though. Pretty big crowd. Robot Kill's got a big day tomorrow. All right. Well, good luck with that. Thank you all for joining me. I'm going to have another bite of cake, as I have eaten very little of this massive piece of cake. The cake is very heavy duty. It is bigger than it looked. It's delicious, though. Thank you, Erica. Nom nom nom. Yeah, I'm gonna keep this sheet. It definitely does not need to be done in a single evening sort of thing. We can keep it going until we get a bingo. This was fun though. We did it, everyone. We're at nearly 100 streams. Technically more if you count the non-reading ones, the voting ones and things like that. And a full year of doing this, reading books and chatting. Erica liked it. We should keep doing it. The tricky thing is actually coming up with stuff to fill in the spaces. We've been introduced to a new character though, so we might be able to include him in the future, depending on how things go. But yeah, I had fun. And I've had fun over this past year. It's just been fun reading frequently. It's nice having, you know, a schedule of this is when we're going to read books. Possibly look up drinking games for future books and just use those as bingo spots, yeah? That's true. Spoiler-free ones, hopefully. This one has been entertaining because, you know, we are on the third book of this series, so we know kind of some of the things that have come up repeatedly. So some of these have been a bit of a joke. Definitely, for instance, the angst one. And Grim Bard up here. Almost everything on here has been something we've talked about at some point or another. Alright. Well, I had fun. I don't see anyone on my list of people that's streaming right now, so I'm not going to bother figuring out a raid. But thank you all for joining me on this. I've had fun. And if anybody has any ideas for things that you want me to read in the future, you know, now we've got this dual camera setup, so I could do comics, as previously mentioned here. We could figure that out, do some comics or manga or things. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for, like, copyright claims, things like that. Because technically, like, this, I mean, you know, my big thing is we're doing this with discussion in mind, right? And I hope that clears us a little bit for usage of the materials in terms of, you know, we're basically doing like a book club here. Maybe Where's My Cow? That would be a good one. But I worry that, like, you know, I showed some Spider-Man on the stream today, and, well, you know, I hope that Marvel doesn't get litigious on me. Because I think Marvel is a little scarier than David Eddings or Del Rey Publishing. You know, not to take shots at Del Rey, just I worry more about a classic comic or two could be cool. Erica says it's non-commercial, it may be covered under fair dealing. Well, I'm not going to pretend to understand that law, but anyways, if anyone has thoughts or suggestions or things that I could do in the future to keep things fun here, I'm always happy to hear that stuff, and maybe we'll incorporate some of it. That'd be cool. But yeah, thank you all very much. Happy 1-year anniversary, everybody. Alright. Hopefully everyone has a good evening, a good sleep, and a fun rest of the weekend. Painting stream. Oh boy, I don't feel qualified for that. Alright. Have a good weekend, everyone. I'll be back here next Wednesday, you know, assuming our house isn't being viewed by people or something like that. Good night. See y'all next week. Bye. The new camera doesn't have a screen cover, so all I can do is go click. And bye.